AJ, thank you so much, and awesome being here at this powerful summit. Thank you so much for having me. I am Larry Jemison. I am an HBCU graduate myself, but I'm also the vice president of HBCU Connect LLC. I work in the business development side, and with that, our main objective is to be a bridge to students and alum who graduate from historically Black colleges and universities, and partner them with your job opportunities, whether those are internships or professional career services or full-time jobs. We want to be that bridge for you. What we found is that our 1.2 million members, they're in tune to what we say. So when HBCU Connect sends out your messages, whether that be an email blast, newsletter, a student-run ad, it doesn't matter. When we send it out, they see it as credible and they see it as someone who cares about their success. And I think that's one of the keys when we're talking about the D&I space, particularly in this market. You know, if you looked at where we've come and from where we've come, we're making tremendous strides. But when we look at D&I, we can't forget about that inclusion piece. How do you make me feel when you engage me, when you're interviewing me, when you're bringing me out to see your facilities, pre-COVID, of course, when you're whatever it is, are you trying to make it comfortable for me to come on board, make an impact, and be successful? And that's where we find some of the biggest disconnects, because a lot of times your organization may not know how to assimilate or really speak that language. And that's where we come in. We help out and we say, listen, the email blast that we're going to be doing to highlight your job openings, and you may have thousands of them depending on your company size. How is that attractive to the market base that you're trying to reach? And when you do that, are you effectively looking and showing the depiction of what this marketplace looks like? That can be tough. So when your emails go out, are there any people of color in the ad? That's a simple one. Sometimes, you know, a 21-year-old just coming out of college or even a seasoned veteran looks and says, I don't know if this place is going to be accommodating for my success. Secondly, what about the role if I do obtain the position and I get to Tulsa, Oklahoma, or what have you? Will I fit in? Are you going to make it accommodating for me? Have you taken the extra step to make sure that I'm going to be taken care of? Because race does play a part in our job, but it also plays a part in our culture. And it's not something that we look down on. It's something that we should uplift. And I think that's what this summit is doing. So it's been a wonderful time with you so far. And, you know, I think the biggest piece of attracting and obtaining great talent, particularly in the manufacturing space, are you cultivating a position of inclusion where I feel accommodated when you engage me? I think that's the biggest thing. And we know culture is tough to change. So with that, I can't do it alone. I am here today with two dynamos of the diversity and inclusion space. We're being joined today by Ms. Mona Barbary and Sapina Gapchak, who are global diversity and inclusion leads with Pfizer and Ingredion, respectively. And they are subject matter experts. They're working on these things every day to highlight and really do what it takes to push this envelope forward and move the needle to the top. So thank you. The ladies, are you here today?
I am here. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Hi, Larry. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Yes, we are live and in effect and talking about moving the needle forward when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And we felt that who else to talk to about this space than two experts. So glad to see you here. And I'll just jump right into it and ask you a couple questions and kind of get your feel for it. Is that okay with you?
That's totally fine.
Great. So we're already starting to see the metrics start to move or shift down as it pertains to people of color advancing and moving ahead. How do we keep this in the forefront, and what actions must be taken so that we don't lose the zeal and zest that we've obtained over the last few months?
Sure, I can go first. You know, what is very interesting this year and what happened in May with the senseless murders of George Floyd is that the corporate space, just in general, has never responded in a way it did this year. You know, we had uprising in Ferguson that happened 6 years ago. For example, here in Chicago, we had a murder of a Black young man on the streets, and we didn't see that response from the corporate spaces. And it's very interesting because this year, you know, the private sector is taking the responsibility of it. And I think the biggest challenge sometimes is really realizing what's at the root of it. And what is at the root of it is the systemic and institutional racism, right, that our organization are built on. So really what needs to happen is the bigger push of understanding historically, if we are a manufacturing organization and then racial inequities that we have within our organization, understanding the system that kind of built and continue to build inequities in policies and practices. So I feel like this is one of the biggest challenging I see, and then really differentiating and understanding by the leaders and by especially the white leaders, the difference between individual races and then the systematic races, and overcoming that defensiveness of it and understanding the privileges they hold to move us forward.
Amazing. That was awesome. Mona, would you like to join in on that conversation?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So we saw an awakening like no other in corporate America, right, in June. And as at Pfizer, we actually began our D&I journey, several years before that. But June certainly re-energized the entire enterprise. It was like for our Black colleagues, I heard comments like it was like someone ripped off the Band-Aid and suddenly it was okay to share their experiences that they've shared in the workplace, but also experiences that they shared walking to their car, or things like the talk, children, what they have to tell their children about wearing a hoodie or walking down the street, how they present themselves. And so we've had a lot of courageous conversations with thousands of leaders across our network at Pfizer, and we're still having them. So last week, I had 2-hour sessions each with one of our sites in North Carolina, making sure that all of our people manager understood what it meant to have a courageous conversation, because we did release guidance, we gave PowerPoints, we even released questionnaires that you can ask with your team. But we found still that there was a real fear in having these conversations. There's a fear in saying the wrong thing. There's a fear in saying the word Black versus African American, or what does it mean to be brown? Who are the brown people? And so there's a real education that has to happen, and companies really have to take on the education piece. But like you said, Larry, there's a big piece to inclusion and belonging. And I'll go as far as saying, if you spend all of your efforts just on the diversity piece, it's like filling up a bucket with a hole at the bottom. Your colleagues are going to leave. So creating that D&I plan. So we have 40 sites across our globe. Every single one of our sites is required to have a D&I plan using the same template across the board. And we measure that plan, and we have discussions about that plan. And we look at that plan on a monthly basis across the network. So those are some ways that we are making sure that this wasn't just a one-time fling. We're continuing the discussion with 2025 opportunity parity goals.
Wow. Thank you so much. Both of those responses were spot on. And I think the education that Mona just mentioned takes place on both sides, the company and the graduate or the person of color who's looking to become a part of the organization. And Sabina, your thoughts couldn't be echoed more when you mentioned George Floyd. I think you hit it when you said that it was like ripping the Band-Aid off and exposing what's really going on. So thank you both for that. I guess the natural progression from that is, what are some of your biggest challenges that you all see in your areas when it comes to the hiring and promoting, which is, finding those top talents and then getting them in, but also the retaining of those employees once they get there? What are some of the challenges that you see, and how do you dispel those?
I think Mona hit it on this when she talked about the culture. I think the culture that we currently operate in our organization is very important to have a self-examination and understand the culture, because you can continue recruit and bringing people of color, especially Black people, to the culture that is not healthy and inclusive. They're going to leave right away. They're not going to stay. They're going to figure it out. So I think really for our leaders, what happened after June was important for them to really take the ownership and find their passion and find something that they are passionate about when it comes to the Black inclusion. So within Ingredient, we have leaders of North America who actually created a project that is called Advancing Black Leaders. And they have teams. So there are 3 different areas in that project. One focuses on the exposure to executives. So really focusing our Black employees, how much exposure do they really have to the executives? Looking at the succession plans of our VP level executives, do they have Black people in their succession plan, right? And then really focusing on the community. Do we have a partnership with the university? Do we have partnerships with the historically Black university? Do we have partnerships with nonprofits that work in the Black communities to really assist and put our money where our mouth is? So these focuses are very important, but I think one of the important things is really culture and the expectation of culture. We measure inclusion and belonging at Ingredient through our engagement survey, and we're able to kind of address if we see that the leader is really struggling with inclusion, we're able to address it through education. And one other thing I just want to mention that I have seen a lot in the manufacturing space, because historically have been one white male-dominated space, is the affinity bias. But, our leaders tend to hire people who are just like them, because sometimes we overestimate our own abilities, thinking that we are the best to do, people for this job. And if we hire somebody who's just like me, they're going to be wonderful and perform wonderfully. So really educating our leaders about that, addressing that, because it's unconscious. They unconsciously do that because hiring somebody different, for example, from a Black community, in their mind, they think it's going to take just longer to adjust. I think these things, and the last thing is metrics, demographic metrics. We do measure, our executives have what we call people scorecards. So we actually do measure how are they doing when it comes to hiring Black individuals. And for us, it's not just focusing at the lower level, it's really the higher level. We want to make sure that the manufacturing plant floor is reflected in the leadership, right? Because we can't just bring diversity at the lowest level. We really have to have it reflected at the highest level as well.
Wow. Thank you so much. You kind of jumped into our next segment of exactly where we were going. Mona, Sabina kind of told us how they measure an ingredient. How do they measure activities and performance? And if it's working, what do you all do at Pfizer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love data. I won't build a strategy out unless I look at the data first. And so in the D&I space, we look at representation. We look at representation by level. We look at representation by gender, by U.S. minority. And what we found specifically in manufacturing, not so much in the enterprise, is we have the pipeline, but the pipeline's at the lower levels, and we have opportunity to grow for gender and for U.S. minority development. And so that certainly led into what our strategies should be. And so our strategy is to increase representation at all levels of the pipeline, but really focus on the internal development and acceleration of our people of color in manufacturing. So we have very focused D&I plans around that. I also look at the engagement survey, and I don't look at the overall number. I break it down. I break it down by U.S. minority. I break it down by people managers versus individual contributors. I break it down and look and see if there's gender differences in the responses. And I guarantee you, when you break it down and look at all of the ways that responses can be grouped, you will find differences, and you'll find opportunities to increase your engagement for certain groups of colleagues at the company. And then you want to look at turnover. You want to look at turnover again by level, by race, by gender, by all of the dimensions, and see, are women leaving at the senior manager level? Are Black men leaving at the director level? Why? Are you having stay interviews with these groups of people to make sure that they're happy, to see if they're interested in other opportunities and other projects and development to keep them? So what are we doing to keep the talent that has specific higher turnover rates than others? We're also looking at our talent development, our L&D, so your high performers, the programs that we're sending them to. Are we sending the same groups of people there? So we have goals, aspirational goals, even down to the talent that we're selecting for L&D programs. And then we're measuring from year to year. Are we improving in those metrics? Are we lowering our turnover for women and U.S. minorities? Are we increasing representation? What's happening with the high potentials that we're putting through these L&D programs? So those are just some of the ways that we're looking at data to make sure that we're making an impact.
Yeah, and I definitely just want to echo Mona, because I think all the DEI professionals are really like fascinated with data, because the data can tell you so much. Looking at data back and looking at the historical trends so much. And I would really recommend make sure you break down your BIPOC numbers. So Black, Indigenous, people of color. You just don't look at the number as a whole. Break it down by race, ethnicity, every single level, gender, any way you can, because you're going to see differences a lot. For us, it was, for the longest time, our BIPOC number was driven by our Asian population and our idea labs. And we had to really make sure, what are we doing for our brown, Black employees and brown employees, and just really cut your numbers out in many ways.
Sabina, it's really interesting because the Asian population at Pfizer as well is driving some of the increase in minority grouping. So you have to break down the U.S. minorities, because it will show a difference in patterns. And it also shows you the opportunity you have, where you should invest most of your time and energy to make sure that everyone's having an equitable experience.
Definitely. And I think what's harder to measure for us too, because we're both global companies, the race, how you say, it's not only the US thing. For ingredients, have seen in Brazil. In Brazil, 53% of people are Black. So what's harder about measuring that is that we only live in the US, we do the self-identification is legally harder anywhere else. Make sure that however you can, this is the race as a dimension of diversity is on your radar, not only for the US region, but for everywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
Amazing. I mean, it's awesome to hear the work that you all are doing and how you track it. This is just phenomenal. And as a person of color, it's glad to hear, that, hey, look, someone's going to recognize my birthday as well. It's like being a child in the room. Everybody wants to know when's your birthday, but don't stop when you get to mine, right? I want you to know when my birthday is too. So really cool work that you all are doing. I guess the last question that I would kind of propose to you is, with all the work that you're doing, how do we make sure that person of color's voice is being heard, moving on up to leadership and executive leadership? How do you make sure that they're heard both in your organization and in the communities that we serve?
I would say really bring them to the table, give them the voice. That will be one of the most important things. When we talk about our Black community, if it is through a talent talk or succession planning, bring them to the table. Let them tell us what they need. So an ingredient, we are, this year we added equity into our name of DEI, because we treat DEI as a lens. So equity is really important to us, providing resources that people need, because we recognize the playing field is not level yet. So one of the things is also we do that for our business resource group. So have a business resource group, Alliance for Black Employees, and we making sure that, individuals who are leading that group are exposed to the executives, interact with the executives, and they are also amazing advisors. If it wasn't for our Black group, they made it the response to George Floyd senseless murder and what happened after so much easier for us as a company, because they kind of guided us through that. Right. So really making sure. And last one thing I want to touch on, we also, when we do the talent talks or when we do the succession planning, we are very intentional. So we will have a talent talk that specifically focuses on our Black employees, because we want to really look, if somebody has been in a position for 7 years without a promotion or any movement, what is happening there? We really want to address it, and we want to address development, of our Black employees. Case by case, not just because sometimes when you bring it all as an entire employee population, usually people of color, especially Black employees, get forgotten. So that's how I will say.
Thank you. Mona, do you have any time to close us out? You have an update?
I'll give one solid example of what you can do to make sure that people of color have a voice. I have a site where we invited the global Black community to speak to the site leadership team. And together, in collaboration, they developed a D&I plan that they would be accountable and responsible for delivering. So that's just one easy example that you can launch within your sites, is to make sure that visibility exists there. And one of the actions is, in fact, raising the visibility of our colleagues, making sure that colleagues can present at certain meetings. So there's actually a plan of what colleagues are going to present where to increase their visibility. So there's just one tangible action that you can do.
Amazing. Simply amazing. Mona and Sabina, you all are fantastic. I think we are in pretty good shape when we look at moving forward in the diversity and inclusion space. And thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you.